about today. But those are my two favorite Jane stories. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Jeff almost as long. And I will say, just as an aside, one of Jane's last words to me were, "Take care of Jeff." So I assign that to everybody in this room because he was, thank you, Hunter, absolutely, so dear to her. So for 46 years, it's always been Jane. Jane, every August, her birthday, I would call her and say, "Oh, Jane, tell me how it is. You know, you're so much older than me now." Because my birthday's not till November. And so I always focus on the fact that she had this long period of time of seniority to me, which I think became old over the 46 years. But over these years, we shared the jokes, we shared the laughter, we shared friendship, we loved being together. And I think that'll have to sustain me until, as she promised in those last days, that when the door opens and I go through, she's going to be there. And so she's not gone. She's just there. I promise.
Thank you. Now, Matt Scott, James' son, our son.
Hello. First off, I'd like to thank everybody for making the trip here to be with us to celebrate my mother's life. I have seen some of you a few times over the years of my life, infrequently. Some of you I've just met, but most of you have seen me at various stages. And I want to thank my father for putting all this together. I think he did a wonderful job, and Mom will be very proud of you. So I'll keep this very short. The biggest thing to me about my mother, and that has seemed more unique as I've gotten older and talked to many of my peers, is that looking back through my childhood, no matter what happened, and until the very last days in hospice, I always knew that I was deeply loved. I knew there was nothing my mother would not do, no obstacle or anything she would not overcome in order to help me or protect me. And that, to me, was all I could have ever asked for in a mother. And I hope, and it sounds like many of you got to share some pieces of that, in that she cared deeply about the world, about all the people she knew and interacted with. So I hope a little piece of that was shared with all of you. And you knew that she cared about all of you. And that is basically what I would want to say. Thank you so much for being here today.
Okay. So I guess it's just down to me here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So before I said anything for myself, I just wanted to share with you, after Jane died, literally hundreds of people sent letters and emails to me. And I was just going to read some excerpts from just a few, and they're almost sort of random in a way. I could have easily chosen another. This one's from Elena Edwards, who was the founder of the NAVA chapter in West Palm Beach, Florida. She said, "I know how deeply you loved her, and you know how greatly she was loved by everyone. She was definitely one of the sweetest, kindest souls I've ever known. From Wendy Evans Joseph, who was the principal architect of the Holocaust Museum, designed the Visitors Pavilion at the National Medical Center. She said she was an amazing woman. She could do everything. And that really was pretty much true. It wasn't true of her ability to deal with cockroaches, however. I had to do that. However, she dealt with spiders. I couldn't deal with them. From Dean and Sally Jew, who were president of the NABA Tallahassee, Florida chapter, and they said, Jane's life was like a beautiful butterfly, one that people eagerly sought and wished to remain in their sights forever. The memory of Jane will always be with NABA members, and she has enriched so many lives during her time on this earth. From Alice Mayo of Baruch College, she said, Jane was a truly beautiful woman, inside and out. Jane epitomized so many wonderful and inspiring things to me. Gracious, gentle, charming, smart, funny, and fun. From Robert and Margaret McAllen, who's the city of McAllen, Texas, which is next to the Butterfly Center, is named for their family. Margaret said, what a splendid lady she was, one to love because of her kindness, graciousness, charm, and wisdom. From Marge Benson, whose family, Benson Rio Grande Valley State Park is named, and Senator Lloyd Benson. Marge said, how I admired Jane, her intelligence, her charm, her enthusiasm, her happy disposition, and her sweet, loving friendship. From Rita Venable, author of The Butterflies of Tennessee, she said, she was the first person I ever talked to in the NABA world. I called and told her I thought I had an anise swallowtail here in the Nashville area. She was so kind and gently explained that it was a black swallowtail. Such a soothing and wonderful voice she had. She had a way of just making things right. What a gift. I'd like to share with you some facets of and facts about Jane that many of you here probably don't know, even after hearing everything you've heard. One thing which was said is she didn't really care about money. Or in general, she didn't care really about material things really at all either. She disliked shopping, unlike most women, not to pick on women. But she didn't enjoy shopping. She'd almost never, ever buy anything for herself. If she did, it would be just completely utilitarian and inexpensive. The only way she would really take pleasure in material things was if they were a present from somebody else. Then the emotion of somebody giving her a present would provide meaning to an otherwise meaningless material object. Through the 80s, and you may know the people that worked with her, through the 80s, most of her clothes, including like all of her business clothes and so forth, I bought for her. So I would go to the store and I would find like 5 outfits that I thought would work well for Jane. And I'd bring them home and she'd try them on and she'd maybe keep 1 or 2 and I'd bring the others back. For a short while, Jane took cello lessons. It didn't last too long because she was too busy at work and so forth. But for that little bit, we would play piano, cello duets, and I just loved it. Cherished that memory, even though she was just playing the first simple things on the cello. It just felt so good. You might not know that in Jane was in high school, I think. She was a cheerleader. We have other cheerleaders here, I know. Also in high school, she played basketball. After working as a postdoctoral fellow at the University of California, San Francisco, Jane was offered a position as an assistant professor there at UCSF, which was a big deal. And I and others encouraged her to take that position. But as she wrote in a letter to Ann James, she didn't want to be separated from me and took a position at Rockefeller University instead. And in truth, I think it worked out better for her because I don't mean because of me, but I meant that I think, as I said, the time she spent at Letterly was great. She really thrived there. She really loved it. And I think that environment was better for her than an academic environment. Jane loved sunsets, stars, meteor showers. If there was a beautiful sunset, I had to go out and watch it with her. She loved roses and sunflowers, really all flowers, but especially roses and sunflowers. As many of you know, she loved wine, especially champagne. And so I would get her a lot of that. She loved good food. She was perhaps the world's expert, and I don't kid around here, at burning toast. and that's because basically I don't know, she thought things would take care of themselves or something, you know. She would put something like, she would put this toast, she always insisted on doing the toast in the broiler, which is fine, but then she would walk away and forget it was there. And the house would fill with billowing smoke and the alarms would go off. You'd think when this happened the 150th time, but no, it didn't. It was tough to change Jane on that. Actually,
got that from our dad.
Yeah, really? Actually, one of the best presents I ever got was a present to Jane. Our son, Matt, Kristen, gave it to her. It was an electric water boiler. And this stopped destroying all of the pots and pans. Okay. So over the past 30 years or so, you might not know, I did most of the cooking. You know, not all. Jane would cook too. Like I said, she would cook kasha vanishkas. So this was my secret recipe to keep Jane happy with me. I'd feed her delicious food and I'd ply her with champagne all the time, and it worked most of the time. However, and you haven't heard much about this, maybe a little hint, but not too much. Jane truly, and I don't think you'd get that from everything that's been said here today, but Jane was truly volcanic. Volcanic. She was placid on the outside. It seemed like nothing's going on there. But inside, she was filled with molten lava. Jane and I almost never fought about the substantive issues that so many couples argue about. We didn't fight about money, about where to live, where to go on vacation, you know, which family to visit, what car, whatever it was. Those weren't the things. Rather, with Jane, the overwhelming thing that was just a continual thing through the 44 years we were together was, today, I'm not feeling that you are passionately in love with me. When that happened, almost anything could make her erupt. And when she did, you better get out of the way. And the walls of our house in California were pockmarked with big holes. Okay. And even the house here in New Jersey bears scars. None of this should be taken in any way as any kind of complaint or negative on my part. Jane couldn't abide complacency. And in the end, that made our bond that much stronger. The best day of my life involved Jane in a way that probably wouldn't be the best day of most people's lives. I was in law school between semesters, and I had a hernia operation. And they'd given me anesthetic, and I wasn't responding well. It was still making me sick. And they also gave me Percocet to deal with the pain. And what I didn't know was the Percocet was making me sick as a dog. And so I was truly miserable and in pain and just felt completely rotten. And this went on for a day or so, and I woke up in the middle of the night. It was 2:30 in the morning, and I just felt so terrible, and I woke up, and Jane was there watching over me. That was the best moment of my life. And we'll talk about the Takashima thing. Well, I'll tell you one other little story that tells you something else about Jane. I don't know how many of you know this, whatever, but Jane had a major stress heart attack after Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, and her mother was dying, and other events happened that could cause anybody incredible stress. And Jane had this stress heart attack, and so Matt and I flew down the next morning, and we get down there, we get into the hospital, and this is after Katrina, so everything's a mess. We get into the hospital, and the cardiologist, Jane's down in testing, the cardiologist takes me into his office by himself, and he says to me, he shows me her heart, which essentially looks like a mess, little balloon. This is a typical thing of this kind of heart attack. And he says to me, "We're probably going to have to do a heart transplant." And so, I'm devastated, of course. Just at that moment, they take Jane up from downstairs. They wheel her up in this gurney. She's got a big smile on her face. She's beaming. "Oh, hello, so good to see you." She says, "Now look," in a few minutes she says to me, because she was working actually with HVA at the time, and they had a client developing some kind of boot or something in Mississippi. And she says to me, "Listen, I know I know I'm not going to be in any condition to go meet with my client in 3 days. So would you drive me?" That was Jane. One other thing I want to share with you is Jane was an organ donor, and because she died of cancer, most of her organs could not be used for this purpose. However, her corneas could. And so the night she died, at about midnight, she died at 7:24. About midnight, the place that does the organ stuff called me midnight and said they possibly wanted to do this. They had to ask me questions. So for an hour, literally an hour, they asked me, like, was Jane bisexual? Has she ever done heroin? Needles, all of this stuff, And anyway, okay, then I heard nothing. Then a month later, and I've got to tell you, the 2 weeks after Jane died were, I won't go into it now, but a month later, when I was a little bit functional, I got a letter from this organ transplant called Eversight, I think it is, telling me that Jane's corneas went to restore sight in a woman in Illinois and another one in Michigan. And I can't tell you how much better that made me feel. How I felt like something good. So anyway, that's all. Not so much to recount that story as to urge you to be an organ donor, if not for yourself and the other people, for the people that love you. Now I try to be more like Jane since she's died. You heard the first story I told where we compliment each other. She